Welcome to another exciting episode of the Bible in 1 year with John. And today we're talking about Job chapter 14, 15, and 16. And this is a transition period. We're transitioning from Job's first series of debates with his three friends to Job's second series of debates with his three friends. Now, there are three series of debates, and we're just getting started on the second one. Chapter 14, he starts out with some similes emphasizing how short life is. And those similes include things like a flower that has gone too soon. Life is like a flower that's gone too soon, or it's like a fleeting shadow. The sleep of death is as permanent as heaven in other contexts. This speaks to the fact that earthly life is irrevocably lost upon death. But here, Job seemingly expresses that he has no hope at all of an afterlife. Then we move on to verse 13 of chapter 14 here. And in Job's despair, he continues to shift his stance, though. He kind of goes back and forth from thinking there's not an afterlife to now he's thinking that maybe there is an afterlife. Maybe there is life after death. And maybe God will remember him kindly later on. Maybe his anger will ease off a little bit and he'll remember Job favorably and then act on Job's behalf to help him out and get him out of this mess. Job felt that there was hope of life after death when we get to verse 15, though. He's talked himself up. He could endure his present struggles at this point. Then we come to chapter 15. This begins the second series of Job's debate, the great debate, round two, fight, with his friends. And he goes back to friend number one, Eliphaz. Eliphaz started out by asking some rhetorical questions, suggesting a negative answer. Unlike a truly wise man, Job's defense was self-serving and empty, according to Eliphaz. Job displayed his passion as a hot east wind or a sirocco which had entered the depths of his belly. All right, so Eliphaz suggests that Job's intemperate attitude, or his really bad attitude, had affected his proper reverence for God. How then could Job claim to be wise? Because wisdom begins with the fear of God. And Eliphaz also believed that Job's stance against his friends' counsel was dictated by an underlying inequity. In other words, that he was not equal with them. There was something wrong with Job. There was something less about Job than them. Yet Job's words seemed to condemn him, the friends. Eliphaz wanted Job to realize that he had no claim to superior wisdom. He was trying to convince Job that his wisdom was just as wise as Job's, if not wiser, because Job had obviously done something wrong. So then we get into Job's reply. Okay, Job's reply starts in chapter 16. In chapter 16, Job comes out with guns ablazing. He says, I have heard many things like these. You are all miserable comforters. Is there no end to your empty words? What provokes you that you continue testifying? If you were in my place, I could also talk like you. I could string words together against you and shake my head at you. You see, back then, if someone shook their head at you or shook their head at you, that was a bad thing. That was a negative thing. To shake your head at someone, that was not good. It was almost like flipping you the bird in today's ways. So he's literally saying that you guys are terrible comforters. You're not good friends. And that literally means that they are trouble. They're harming him. They're causing him more hardship. And they were mocking him is what he feels. Job then observed in verses 16 through 17 that whether he spoke or said nothing, his suffering remained unaltered. He would therefore speak, hoping that God would hear and be sympathetic to him. Verse 9, he talks about the gnashing of teeth, and that conveys rage or hatred, of course. His enemy, who so scrutinized him that he seemed to look right through them. Job reminded his friends in verses 12 through 14 that about his former state about his state of ease. How Job is still, he was in a former state of ease, but then when they came into it, it said he was not at ease anymore. And then he used some metaphors. Job likened God to a warrior in command of a vast army. God had made him the object of his attack. Eventually, an arrow struck Job's vital organ with tragic consequences. He compared himself to a besieged city whose defenses had been repeatedly assailed and finally penetrated by God's assaults. So he feels like he is being attacked by God and he has been wounded. Essentially, he feels wounded, both in spiritually and emotionally wounded, and of course physically, because of everything that's been taken away from him by this time. So, because Job must surely die soon, according to him, Job put on sackcloth, and which is a sign that he feels like he's fixing to die. But then he refers back to the Cain and Abel story again. Remember back in, I believe it was chapter 6, when he refers to the mark of Cain. And now he's also referring to the Cain and Abel story when he pleaded that his spilled blood would not be covered like the blood of the innocent Abel back in the Cain and Abel story. Job's blood would cry out from the ground for justice because he had done nothing wrong either, just like Abel had done nothing wrong. And he asked that his cry for vindication not be forgotten until his bloodshed in innocence was avenged. And then he ends by basically saying that he did not feel that he was adequate enough to talk directly to God. He felt that he needed a mediator, somebody to go, a go-between, somebody to talk to God on his behalf at this point. And then we're going to find out tomorrow in chapter 17 a little bit more about this. And tomorrow I'm going to share a little bit of historical context, not biblical history, but some actual history from more recent history, that chapter 17, 18, and 19 that we're reading tomorrow. Also 20. Job 17, 18, 19, and 20 are for tomorrow. And we'll get into a little more historical context. We're going to talk about the second friend who he debates with, and also the third friend begins his debate with him again, round 2 of these. So the fight is on, the debate rages, and tomorrow we will continue with the saga.